Can you talk about the state of NIDALEE and champions like her, where their win rate is very bad in low elo and good in high elo? Is it a champion like NIDALEE are supposed to be? Yes, for starters. There are certain characters who are trash for the average player and insanely good if you're really, really, really good at the game. The poster childs of this nowadays are NIDALEE, RENGAR, and QUIYANA. Those are the three. We're not talking about pro play here. We're just talking about being high on the ladder. NIDALEE, RENGAR, and QUIYANA are both incredibly low power for the average player and incredibly high power for players who are really, really good. That is not necessarily a bad thing for a character to be. It can be, depending on who they are, but it's not necessarily bad. The important part is that the character communicates that that's who they are. And so what I mean by that is, like, there's a big difference between a character like GWEN being like this and a character like NIDALEE being like this. NIDALEE kind of communicates a very high mechanical playstyle, right? So when you play NIDALEE, you're hopping around, switching things, and you're like, yeah, this character's hard, right? And so it's very obvious when you see NIDALEE that you're supposed to get good at her to some degree. Her kit tells you get good. And then it's very rewarding to get good. So I think that can be a very reasonable thing for a character to be, is that another character like this after the changes is a character like Ahri, where Ahri kind of says get good, and she tends to be better for better players. Not nearly as much as like a character like NIDALEE or QUIYANA is, but like that's, I think, a really reasonable progression for a character. It's like, hey, you're silver, you're bad, you lose, and you get good. And that's a good progression for a character. A hard part is when a character's kit and theme does not communicate get good, but you're still supposed to get good. This is an issue that GWEN has. GWEN is a character who actually is very, very, very good in the hands of insane mechanical players. But her kit doesn't communicate that that would be the case. Her kit at face value looks very, very straightforward. And on top of that, her theme doesn't communicate that that would be the case, because she's a cute girl who looks like she would run a cafe. And so she actually looks like more of a character that you just like be able to hop on and just play and have a good time on and be like, yay, snipping people with scissors, and not like this mechanical monster that if you perfectly manage the spacing between your scissors and your W zone, you can destroy your opponent without taking any damage. And so GWEN is an example of a character who I'd say suffers from having a skew towards better players, because her kit and theme, when you play them, don't communicate that you should learn those mechanics in the way that NIDALEE is like, go figure this out. GWEN's like, I'm snipping with scissors. And then you lose and you're like, I guess I should have snipped with scissors better. And you don't really like make the connection of, oh, this character is very, very high skill cap. And so that's, I think the difference is, like, there's nothing wrong with the character being skewed towards the best characters and players in the game if that a character's theme and kit communicate like, oh, this is a skill fantasy, get good. So that's the hard part there. Were the changes to KHA'ZIX's character intentional? He's gotten nerfs to bonus and buffs to bases that he's changed from a scaling champ to being a bit weak early that gains a lead and has to struggle. I mean, it just depends on like if KHA'ZIX players like those changes, right? I think it's overall reasonable to say any given assassin is not good at scaling. Like, one of the typical counterplays to assassin is grouped fights, which happen later in the game. And so you expect most assassins to snowball early and fall off. That's not necessarily the case with all assassins, but like that's a reasonable like expectation to have of assassins. I also look at KHA'ZIX right now, and he's incredibly popular. So like, I don't necessarily look at KHA'ZIX and be like, wow, his current shape is wrong for the character. Like, it seems like a lot of people are playing him and having a good time and enjoying the champion. So if KHA'ZIX went from a late game scaler to an early game, character who snowballs and gets ahead, it seems like that's probably close to fine with KHA'ZIX players and pretty aligned with what assassins are supposed to do, which is snowball early and then probably fall behind. And so, yeah, I don't think that's an unreasonable shape for KHA'ZIX to be. I would be worried if like his class wasn't about falling off, but again, assassins do fall off to some degree, and I would be worried if we saw like after these changes his popularity plummet, because then it would be like, oh, it seems like KHA'ZIX players don't enjoy the shape of the champ, but it doesn't seem like either of those things have happened, so he's probably chilling. Not saying he's in the perfect spot, but those are things I would think about when like talking about like how a character plays. Assassins are strong early and fall off late, unless you're Pantheon, in which case you one-shot while building tanky and have that overpowered E. I don't know where you're getting that like Pantheon is this god tier late game character, but like one of the reasons assassins fall off late, and I think this applies as well to Pantheon, is the fact that late game the enemy team is likely to be grouped up as 5, and specifically the support tends to be just sitting on the AD carry with a bunch of other people. And so late game, it tends to be significantly harder for assassins, including Pantheon, to get to the character they want and one-shot them, even if they have the scaling to trivially one-shot. Like, it's not about, like, I scale, so I just one-shot you all the time. That doesn't necessarily mean your assassin is going to be strong. You also have to deal with the fact that, how do you get around the fact that there is 5 people grouped together that are trying to stop you from getting to your target? And so that's like the thing about assassins and why they fall off late game, generally speaking, not always true, of course, is their late games tend to have the issue of how do I get to who I want to kill. Also, the other reason they fall off late game is level scaling. The bane of assassins is base stats, and it turns out that every character in the game, including AD carries, gets health, armor, and magic resist per level. And so the later the game goes, the higher level the squishies are going to be, and every single level a squishy has makes it harder and harder for the assassin to kill them, even if they're like, building full build. That's like some of the challenges about late game for assassins, as well as just how passively tanky a lot of characters can get by the end of the game. That said, like, all champions can kill you late game, right? Like, that's not all champions. A lot of champions can kill you late game, especially assassins. It's just how they go about doing it, which is the hard part. What do you think about SETT right now? I don't really have any opinions on SETT at the moment. I don't know what he's like. My personal take on SETT has been, if I was to ever buff SETT, doesn't mean we'll do it, doesn't mean we should do it, but my personal take, I think it would be cool if SETT's Q let him run in both directions. I think that would be a good versatility change for the champion that would help him out. Maybe that's messed up, but I think that would be a cool change to the character that would make him better for high MMR players and more versatile without necessarily saying he just one-shots you or something. So that's my take on SETT. Why is MR lower than armor? Was it always this way? It was always this way. One of the reasons MR is lower than armor is that the average magic damage character in the game is a burst character. Not all of them. There's a Zir and stuff. But the average magic damage character in the game is a burst character. And so the way a lot of magic damage characters are tuned is to one-shot you. MR being lower means things like flat pen on mages tends to work a lot better if they're one-shotting you. And then another thing about MR is that if you're a burst character, there's actually 2 stats that counter you in a way that it's not the same for an AD carry. You get countered by MR and health. You might be like, well, August, doesn't health and armor counter AD carries? And the answer is, I would say not as much, because AD carries can keep attacking. Sustained damage is such that you just got to keep going. And so yes, health is good. Yes, armor is good. But if you don't kill them now, keep attacking and you might eventually kill them. The thing about burst characters is that they are threshold based, meaning that like you are significantly more stronger as Lux if you can 100 to 0 someone, and the second you can't 100 to 0 them, you get significantly weaker. And so that's why health and magic resist are much stronger counters to a burst mage than armor and health are strong counters to an AD carry, mainly because of that thresholding. It really matters if you have the damage to kill them from full versus every little bit of health makes that, like, eventually can take you over the threshold and then you're significantly worse.